Good morning. I'm Don Budinger. I'm the chairman of the Rodel Foundation and one of the contributors to FiRe from the beginning. If FiRe did nothing else but look into the science and technology future and review it today, it would be the finest experience of its kind in the world. But FiRe has something else that's very unusual. FiRe has a heart. We together have a collective heart. The next 15 minutes will be a discussion about an element of our hearts. I have with me today two people I'd like to introduce. Chip Weil on my immediate left. Chip's a newspaper guy. He's the former publisher of the Journal and Courier in Lafayette, Indiana. He's the former chairman and publisher of the Journal News in Westchester County, New York. He's the former president and publisher of the Detroit News. He's the former U.S. publisher of Time Magazine. He's the former publisher and CEO of Phoenix Newspapers and the parent company of Central Newspaper when it was sold to Gannett. He is a former U.S. naval officer, and he is currently a member of the USO World Board of Directors. On his left is Sloan Gibson. Sloan is a 1975 graduate of the U.S. Military Academy at West Point. He has earned both airborne and ranger qualifications and served as an infantry officer in the U.S. Army. He has a master's degree in economics from the University of Missouri, and he has a master's degree in public administration from the John F. Kennedy School in Harvard. He's a former chairman of the United Way in Alabama and a retired vice chairman and CFO of AmSouth Band Corporation. And in 2008, he was elected USO's 22nd president. Sloan, let me start with you. We all fondly remember those great scenes with Bob Hope and our troops at Christmas somewhere in the world. Bring us up to date. Where is USO now? Your vision, purpose, mission?
When people hear the USO name, they oftentimes think about entertainment. It's still an important part of what we do. Last year, roughly 700 performances and events with celebrities all over the world. Almost every day on the calendar, you'd find celebrities somewhere in the world entertaining troops and families. Centers is the other area, the USO centers, that people hear about because they see an announcement or a sign in the airport. We have 160 centers around the world now. The majority of those are actually located on military installations and over in the war zone. These centers get visited 8 million times a year. About 1 million of those visits by military family members and the other 7 million by our troops. But you know, you think about the USO's mission, it's to lift the spirits of America's troops and families. Well, we ask a simple question: who needs us the most? The answer to that question today is different than the answer would have been 10 years ago. So we do an awful lot to support our men and women that are serving in harm's way at small forward operating bases. Today, mostly in Afghanistan, but also in Iraq. We do an awful lot for their families that are enduring the stresses of multiple deployments due to their loved ones being away. We do an awful lot for wounded warriors and their families, and for families of the fallen, those that have lost a loved one in combat. USO actually has 2 USO centers at Dover Air Force Base where we're there for the return of loved ones and for the families that make that journey. So at the same time we're doing a lot of the things that people remember us from long ago. We've continued to adapt to meet the most urgent needs of our troops and families today.
So explain, let's say if I'm in Iraq and I've lost a limb to an IED, and my military service replaces that with a prosthetic. When I return home, when does my formal care stop, and when does USO step in, and how does that integrate back into coming into society?
Yeah, we really start just as that service member is evacuated from the battlefield. We're at Balad, where the main hospital is in Iraq. We're at Kandahar in Afghanistan and Bagram in Afghanistan, where the major hospitals are. So we're there oftentimes at the bedside when they're first evacuated. We're there at Landstuhl, Germany. Our troops that are seriously wounded, almost all, transit back to the United States for medical care through Landstuhl. We have a 4,000 square foot USO center right there on the hospital campus. So we're there to help support those men and women at that point. And then back home, we're there at the major military medical installations to be a part of the support structure for these men and women. We've learned that there's more to healing than what happens in an operating room or a physical therapy facility. And it involves more than just the wounded warrior. It involves their family as well. So we look at that whole journey from the time they're first evacuated from the battlefield until they return to their community prepared for a happy and fulfilling life. And what we want to do is to meet as many of the urgent and important needs that the wounded warrior and the family face along that continuum.
And how many months typically does that take?
The average amputee today spends 18 months at Walter Reed recovering and going through a series of surgeries. I oftentimes ask people, think of the last time that one of your loved ones was in the hospital for 3 days and how physically and emotionally draining that experience was. Now think 18 months. It's a real challenge. We want to be there for these men and women, for their families, and that's part of the reason that we've committed to construct the 2 largest, finest USO centers anywhere in the world, right on the military campuses there in the National Capital Region at Fort Belvoir and at Bethesda at the National Naval Medical Center. These 2 locations take the place of Walter Reed, which closes later this year. They'll be the focal point for the support of these men and women and their families for that long period of time during their recovery.
Chip, let me ask you, as one of Arizona's most famous citizens, why are you involved with USO, and what's your passion about this?
Well, obviously my passion is very emotional involvement with the military, but I'm also involved financially and personally in helping Sloan in raising the money that we need.
Chip's a great example of volunteers. The USO all over the world only has 500, give or take, employees and tens of thousands of volunteers, all the way from the celebrities and the great leaders that serve on our board down to the folks that I visited with at the Denver airport last night on my way here, who were there just for no other reason than to be there to take care of troops and families.
Sloan, tell us a little bit about, you talk very passionately about when these wounded warriors return and how they want to get back into society. They want to make a contribution, even though, half of them want to go back into the service?
Many of them, when I visit Landstuhl Hospital in Germany, oftentimes seeing mostly young men, just literally 24 to 48 hours off the battlefield in Afghanistan or Iraq, the first thing that's on their mind is, how can I get back to my unit? How can I get back to my men, especially if they're a leader, they're a squad leader, team leader, company commander, platoon leader. They want to know how to get back to their men. You know, these men and women, whether they're returning to their unit or whether they're returning to society, and their families, when they come back, having suffered a traumatic injury, they find themselves in a different battle, fighting a different enemy. The enemy's despair. And for us, we're in the business of lifting spirits. So that's what we're fighting. We're helping them fight that battle. We want them to know, no matter how daunting the challenges may appear, that there's a caring community there that will help them get through those challenges to make that transition all the way back to a happy and fulfilling life.
Talk to us about what that takes and how you design these facilities. With Walter Reed now being shut down totally, replaced by 2 brand new state-of-the-art facilities. Walk us through that.
These USO centers that we're building there, we actually went out and surveyed wounded warriors that had been through that experience in the past, and their family members and caregivers and medical professionals, to inform the design of these centers. Interestingly, the #1 request from wounded warriors and their families was for continuing education. They hit a point almost invariably during their physical recovery where they're continuing to go through therapy, but they feel like they're treading water, that they're not getting ready for what's next in life. And so one of the things we've designed into each of these 2 centers is a state-of-the-art learning center, and we've already begun to reach out to partners like Georgetown University, which is developing a series of certification programs, Microsoft with their series of certification programs in the technology area with Microsoft products, and the American Management Association that has given us a blank check for any wounded warrior family member that wants to take an American Management Association course. It's free of charge. So being able to deliver that continuing education right there from the center, as well as being a place of respite, where a family member can go if they're fatigued and they've been at the bedside for a long time, where the wounded warrior can come and socialize and be with others, because that's an important part of the recovery as well.
Obviously, when you see somebody who's lost a limb, it's just heartbreaking. But isn't one of the major issues that you face, the brain damage and the psychological aspect as well. Talk to us about the contribution
I would tell you that today, thank goodness, many of you remember the stories that ran several years ago about Walter Reed and medical care and all those kinds of things. I'm here to tell you our military is providing extraordinary medical care for the visible wounds of war. What we, and I say that in the broadest sense, what we're not doing well enough yet is providing all the other things that go along with healing to those that have visible wounds. And even more importantly, to your point, Don, we're not doing enough to take care of those that are suffering from traumatic brain injury or from post-traumatic stress. There are literally hundreds of thousands, perhaps an order of magnitude of men and women greater than suffered visible wounds that are suffering from these invisible wounds. And so I know this is about the future in review. I would tell you, as I look to the future, what I see is this long tail that all of us as a society will be dealing with for years to come of these men and women and the collateral damage from their injuries, the damage to families, to children. We even do things to help kids cope with these changes that they see when their mom or their dad comes home and they're different than they were before they left. That, to me, is the long-term challenge that we all face as a society.
Chip, your thoughts on that?
Well, my thought is what can be done. And I look at this group and I'm thinking the brain power that's here might have an idea of something that might be able to help us advance our goals. And so everybody, it arrives differently for everybody, but I'd hope that you would process it that way and think about how you might be able to help us.
We had a piece yesterday on the entertainment technology and 3D and all that. Is that something that you factor into the whole recovery process?
It really is. There are a number of things we try to do. Oftentimes part of the challenge is helping these men and women get their heads back into life, get them re-engaged. And so vigorous competitive sport, the opportunity to get out into different environments. Quick story, we hosted an event for Wounded Warriors and their families back during football season, and I had the opportunity to sit and chat with and observe from a distance a quadruple amputee and his young bride, away from the hospital environment, having a good time. And I got to tell you, that's a vital part of the recovery for that young couple, and that's what these centers are all about. So entertainment's an important part. There are some amazing other technology-driven modalities that are just beginning to be brought to the table. The use of virtual reality in the treatment of post-traumatic stress. Stop and think about that. There are conversations going, looking at ways to use Microsoft's Kinect technology. We do some things right now that are kind of we-based, called Rehabbing with the Troops, where we help these wounded warriors get physically active, sometimes even competing against professional athletes. But imagine being able to do that with Kinect technology, without controllers and things like that. So powerful ways to bring technology to the healing for these men and women and families.
And yet at the end of the day, it seems like the heart and the courage carry everything. Tell us quickly that story about the quadruple amputee that finished the race without his chair.
Last week we co-hosted the second annual Warrior Games at the U.S. Olympic Training Center in Colorado Springs. This is 220 wounded warriors from all branches of the service, from all over the world, competing in Paralympic-style events. Some amazing things you get a chance to see. In the cycling event, a double amputee was competing on a hand crank cycle. And about 2 miles short of the finish line, the chain broke on his cycle. Did he quit? No. He hoisted himself off the cycle and finished the race on his hands. We saw examples of swimmers missing one and sometimes 2 legs that had trouble making it from one end of the pool to the other. And they might stop along the way. The entire crowd would stand up and start applauding. As soon as they started swimming again, everybody would cheer. Nobody quit. And I promise you that every one of you would have been proud to sit there and see your fellow Americans facing those challenges is with such incredible courage and determination.
Okay, in the few seconds we have left, when I think back when I was in my 20s, which most of these wounded warriors are now, somebody in our family, our friends, we were all in the military. With the advent now of the current way that we do this, and we have no draft, only 1% of our citizens are in the military, and the other 99 aren't. Very quickly, what can we do?
There's incredible brain power here, as you mentioned earlier, an awful lot of creativity. There are as many different ways to engage and help as there are people in this room. And so what's got to happen first is that we begin a conversation. I am easy to reach. Email address, sgibson@uso.org. You've got some information in front of you. There's a card there. It's got some contact information. Kelly Seeley's information is there as well. Reach out and contact us. And one of the tables out here also has a sign-up list. If you'd like for us to contact you, to start a conversation, to explore ways you might be able to help, we'd be glad to talk.
Sloan and Chip, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you.